We're here on Date in a Blink today with Master Executive Certified Matchmaker and Science-Based Dating and Relationship Coach, Arlene Washburn.
Modern dating sucks, but it doesn't have to. Here on the Date in a Blink podcast, you'll listen in on 10-minute voice-only speed dates between strangers. The experience is designed to move people beyond mindless swiping and marathon messaging. Our position on online dating? It's time to stop collecting pen pals and start, going on actual dates.
Online dating? That actually involves dating? Is that even a thing anymore? But for real, dating should be fun. We hope listening in inspires y'all to try new ways of meeting people. Tune in every other week to hear a new couple go on a date. In between, we'll talk to relationship experts about how the date went and what we can learn from it.
Will our handpicked podcast matches find love on these Blink dates? Or will they say goodbye to each other after 10 minutes and never look back? Tune in to find out.
Before we jump into today's episode, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain a bit. It's totally free, and Anchor will distribute the podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and lots of other podcasting platforms. Not only that, but it has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. It also lets you make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make your podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Arlene Washburn is a Master Executive Certified Matchmaker and Science-Based Dating and Relationship Coach and creator of the Get Real, Get Love coaching system. She's an industry expert and consultant to many professional matchmakers and coaches. Arlene traveled worldwide, training and mentoring love and industry professionals and singletons. She is the founder of AV Connections, which is a boutique matchmaking agency, Life Past Divorce, which is a resource for individuals affected by divorce, as well as a professional networking platform. Hi, Arlene. We are so excited to host you today and learn more about your background as a certified matchmaker, dating coach, radio and TV guest, speaker, and magazine contributor, and of course, to chat about Courtney and Shresth's date. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It's so good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Diving right in, on the AV Connections website, it says you're a science-based dating and relationship coach. Could you unpack that for us a little bit and explain what science-based dating is and tell us how it differs from other approaches?
So my coaching is based on science and research. I think because I'm very incredulous and I need proof for everything, and I spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry where, we were used to evidence-based, research-based and all of that. I think I brought that into what I do today. And I also needed it to be able to work with really smart people who just don't believe what I tell them. And so I'm able to show the data and the science that is available for dating and relationships.
As someone who loves the research behind things, I think that that's such a surprisingly refreshing approach. Sometimes I feel like a lot of what we see in the industry is people's personal experience and trying to apply an individual experience to help other people. So I really, really love the perspective that you take, because I think that it can be really transformative for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I attract a lot of women that really want to understand and unpack, like, what does it take to have a good relationship? And so while I have a lot of experience for myself and things that I've gone through, I don't think it's fair to be strictly anecdotal about relationships. And I think that a vast majority of quote unquote coaches out there who really there's no barrier to entry. I think that's the approach that they take. It's just all anecdotal and opinions, and it's very detrimental to the people who are already struggling trying to meet their match.
I think another thing that I have noticed and what I see in terms of dating advice is a lot of, reference to this idea that love happens at first sight, or you just know when you meet the right person. And I think, sometimes it makes it hard when we are meeting new people, because we're like, well, I didn't just feel that spark, or there's something missing. We think there's this like elusive thing that we have heard about, but we don't really know what it's defined as. And we look at the movies and we're like, oh, and that's what it's supposed to look like. But I think taking kind of a more science-based approach is a really interesting alternative to that, because it kind of removes yourself from some of the myth that we might hear a lot about in our day-to-day lives and kind of ground us back into reality. So I also really appreciate that different perspective.
Absolutely. And I survey couples that have been in long-term relationships. I've been compiling data for myself in order to write a book. And a good majority of them, you'll ask, did you find each other interesting, or were you attracted immediately? And many will say, no, at first I didn't even like my spouse. And now here they are in these long-term relationships. So this idea that you're going to have these butterflies and that you're going to know, it's just false. And people go through life expecting that and then are disappointed, which is what expectation is really disappointment in the making. So I like to move them away from that and get more clinical about it so that they can then open up and say, okay, well, if this is biologically the way it is, or this is what the data shows or the research, they don't argue with me as much. And a good majority of my clients are women. And I think we as women push back a little bit more than men. I think men are more solution oriented and they just want to fix it and they go along with what you tell them. But a lot of the pushback that I get is usually from the women. And I know because I'm one of them.
Yeah, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of the phrase "fortune favors the bold," and I think that a lot of people think that how you fall in love with someone looks a lot like what you see in the movies, where, oh, we locked eyes from across the room, and I just knew. And I think there's some validity to that, but that's mostly in the lust camp. And so I really appreciate when you're talking about, taking this more clinical approach to, I guess, dating, mating, and relating, which is actually the name of one of my favorite research articles, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But it does show that most people in long-term healthy relationships, that initial spark or that initial connection is something that often can get things started, but is not the thing that sustains that relationship.
Absolutely.
So Arlene, I have a question for you. It sounds like you and your husband met in a way that was a little bit different from how AV Connections matches people. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about how you two met and some of the insights you might have gained from it.
Oh my gosh, this is such a great story. And, I am a very transparent person. My husband at first was like, what? So we met on Match.com. And whenever anybody would meet us, they would say, how did you guys meet? And I would say, oh, we met on Match.com. And he would give me this look. And I'm like, what is the big deal?
Like it's a dirty secret.
Right? I think we need to move away from this shame about using online platforms. I think they're here to stay and they've been around for 30 years. So we need to get over it. But that said, every step of the way in which we met, or the circumstances of us meeting were very interesting, because if I had gone with what people think is a great match versus not, we would not have continued through the relationship. So, for example, he was not geographically desirable. We lived over an hour away. So that's a reason that people throw away so many great candidates. And when I work with clients, if we're helping them with their online profile, first thing I do is go through their garbage bin and see all the gold that they may have thrown out, because I think people do that. And if you ask the average person, I have the absolute perfect match for you. He or she fits all of the categories that you're looking for, doesn't violate your deal breakers, but they're on the other end of the earth and they're going to make you happy for the rest of your life. Most people would say, oh my God, yeah, of course I want to meet this person. So, geography is important to some degree, but I think too much onus is put on that. So that was step number one. Number two, he was super open and honest about everything, almost to a fault, right? But then I got off the phone, and as I was thinking, God, this guy is telling me everything, I thought, hey, at least he's honest. So there's always two ways to look at things. And anyway, I was going through all these motions with him, and little by little, we connected. We met halfway. We hit it off. And I think what united us was that we had very similar core values and similar life goals. And, sometimes we say we're like the male and female version of each other. Is very strange. But we hit it off, and we're happily married for many years now. And to be honest, I wouldn't do this work if I wasn't in a happy and healthy relationship for me personally, because that's the standard that I hold myself to. But there were so many reasons why I could have ruled him out every step of the way based on what people think, so.
There are always reasons to rule people out. And I feel like we've, gotten into this habit of ruling people out for the smallest things. And because there's this feeling of if, there's somebody else out there that will check all the boxes, but that's crazy. That's not how it works. So I love that you found love in this place that you might not have, or, if you hadn't explored other things or gone beyond the normal, boundaries that other people might have set. So that makes me really happy.
Yeah. And I think part of this issue that we have right now is the plethora of people that are available for us online has created this mentality of the bigger, better deal, and people won't settle on anything.
Yeah.
So it's this paradox of choice. And that's why people are spinning their wheels or getting exhausted and having to get off and wait and take time off. And so much time is wasted with this mentality, as opposed to really genuinely giving someone a fair shot and not looking to rule them out, but rule them in.
Rule people in. I like that.
Yeah, I feel like that could be the name of a great podcast. Yeah, and I definitely appreciate this concept that you're sharing of exactly that, of ruling people in, of not focusing on the negatives, but rather focusing on the positives. In your blog post, Decoding 3 Beliefs That Keep Accomplished Women Single, you write about many people being of the belief that love will come to them when they least expect it or when they stop looking for it. And this was actually something that I believe we were kind of talking to this a little bit earlier about, fortune favors the bold, and serendipity is something that you can create more instances of in your life. But you say that, like most things in life, few things just come to you. Sure, you can stumble into your soulmate in the cereal aisle, and that sounds really great, and it sounds like a really wonderful meet cute, but is it realistic? And so could you explain some of your thoughts on that belief and where it can go wrong?
Yeah, I think that pretty much everything that you want in life that is of importance requires effort and energy. And I believe that too often, I would say women in particular have been indoctrinated into thinking that just sit, just wait, when you least expect it is going to happen. And not too many things in life happen that way. And so about 10% of the women, maybe a little bit higher these days, are actually taking action and making things happen for themselves and not just waiting and leaving it to chance. People talk about luck. Oh, she's so lucky she met her guy or whatever. No, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, as Seneca, as a quote from Seneca. And I firmly believe that. So even if your significant other you might meet at a grocery store, it still requires effort in making eye contact, establishing a conversation, asking questions. You have to do something. You can't, it makes me crazy because this is what's constantly being told to people. And I am a firm believer that you need to make it happen for yourself, or you're going to go a long time and give up on a lot of things, whether it's children or marriage or settling. That's what starts to happen later on as you feel like, oh gosh, this is not happening for me. And I am trying to help women avoid that in particular, and of course, men as well.
That makes so much sense. And I think, you're right. We are trained to think things will just fall into our lap. And I think one reason that we sort of like embrace this and latch onto it is because it serves as like a protection from rejection, because it's easier to say, I'd rather wait for that to happen. I'd rather wait for fate, even if it means waiting forever, than face rejection from something I've poured time and effort into. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for overcoming the fear of rejection and getting rid of that mindset that true love should just fall into our laps.
I believe that when it comes to dating, we need to eliminate the word rejection, because really it's all a self-selection process. And that's the dance that we're signing up for. When you're in the dating scene, you're going to self-select and decide whether or not someone's good, not good, but the right partner for you. And they too will have that option. And every step of the way, that needs to be something that is part of the process. And instead of taking it as a rejection, I know that's easier said than done, but a lot of times we get caught up in this idea that we decide we want someone in our lives, but realistically, if we take away the emotion, I know that's hard to do. Do you really want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with you? And so if people are a little bit more diligent about their filtering system and their decision making process and really vetting someone before they allow all those emotions to flood, because once you're in that state of limerence or all these hormones are going through your body, you're basically the equivalent of a drug addict, like drugged up. You're not thinking well. Your amygdala has been hijacked. You're no longer really reasoning about the person that you're involved with. So if you can do more vetting up front before those emotions kick in, you're going to make better partner choices. And if those people opt out, you need to be okay with that. You need to go into it with the mindset. And I think when people stop believing in this fairy tale, they then are a lot more practical about it and understand, hey, this is what the dating process is. We're all self-selecting and deciding, and that's what it is. I hope that helps.
I think it does help. And it reminds me of a shift that I had in my dating life where I would often kind of go and meet a bunch of people, and I would always feel so sad when, quote unquote, rejected, when someone didn't like me. And it took me a really long time to learn something that you very aptly said just a minute ago, that, do you really want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with you? Everybody deserves to be with someone who wants to be with them, someone that you want to be with who wants to be with you. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a really hard mindset, especially when you've gone on, 10 dates, 20 dates, 50 dates, 100 dates, and it feels like you're not getting any closer, but it really does just take one. And, you've been doing this for a long time, and you've probably seen countless different obstacles that people have to navigate when they're trying to find love. And for a lot of people, mindset winds up playing a huge role when it comes to developing meaningful connections. And this is, I think, kind of what we're talking about a bit here. So what sort of mindset have you found to be the most beneficial for finding love? And what advice do you have for people looking to shift their own?
I think it's really important to have a growth mindset. And what that does is, for example, if you're taking an approach and that approach doesn't work, rather than believing that there's something wrong with you, you can believe that, oh, let me try a different approach. And I think the heavy emotions come when we malign ourselves and we say, well, there's something wrong with me. No, you're fine. You're doing fine. All you need is maybe a better approach. Maybe look outside of yourself. Sometimes the mind, as Einstein says, the mind that created the problem can't solve the problem. So maybe go to a dating coach. And that's not a pitch. I really believe that some people need some real skills that are outside of them to have a better approach in their dating, the ways that they date. They also need help with shifting their paradigm about dating so that they don't go into that low vibration, because when you start to get really down on yourself, you tend to attract people in that way. So there's so many little things that go into this, but it's so doable. And I've worked with couples, not couples per se, but I worked with a woman who I was coaching, and I brought her a match as a matchmaker, and they went on a date. He totally hit it. He loved her from day one. He's like, she's great. She's perfect. She didn't want to go on a second date. And thank God I was in her life to help her get out of her own way. And she was able to get married with this man down the road. And he's the only person that she met. She's the only person that he met. And she got married for the first time at the age of 60.
Wow. That's incredible.
That is incredible. So hearing you talk about some of this and how we kind of get into our own ways and malign ourselves, it makes me also think about how when we're dating people and when we go out on these dates, we're so worried about, do they like me? What am I doing wrong? And we don't even think about, do I like them? What are they doing that might be wrong? And so I think there's a real key in shifting our mindsets to kind of focusing on the things that are important to us, and also kind of remembering that if it's not a fit, it has nothing to do with us personally. It's just, you're just not a fit, and that's normal and that's okay. It's a process of exploration and getting to know people. And it doesn't have to mean anything more than it just wasn't a fit. So in any case, my mind started to kind of think about that and kind of as you were talking about it.
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes that people do when they're in this dating process is that they audition. They want to be liked. They want to, have that person connect with them, and they start to audition, and then they lose their authenticity. And rather than doing that, just build common ground, see if there's chemistry, if there's, as I said, common ground, or do you have aligned core values? Do you have similar life goals? Energetically, do you feel like you're similar? Birds of a feather flock together. This business of opposites attract, they may attract, but they won't last.
Shifting to Shresth and Courtney's date, what were some exchanges between them that you saw as especially positive?
I think what I loved about the way they communicated was, I think their energy was kind of similar. You know how sometimes somebody speaks really fast and the other one's very slow? I thought energetically they were kind of on the same pace, and they were very cordial with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And were there any areas where you felt things could have been improved in some way?
Yes, I really believe that they almost went down a rabbit hole about what they do. So there was, obviously people get nervous on first dates, and sometimes they talk about one thing too much instead of moving on to the next topic. And I felt that in the beginning, and maybe it's just my opinion because I'm more of like, get to the point, go to the next, but so of course I'm injecting, this is not the science-based Arlene talking. I think there was too much of the same topic, even though I don't think that it was something they really wanted to talk about. It was just something that came up. And in some instances, he goes into the explain mode, like he's trying to explain things to her. And sometimes that comes off as what they call these days mansplaining. I don't know if she perceived it that way, but that could happen when you go into that. And I believe that he was very competent and warm, but maybe more competent than warmth. And so charisma is like a real balance of competence and warmth. And there's a really great book that just came out that talks a lot about that. It's called Cues. But yeah, she asked one question, and it was a question to garner something negative about him as opposed to something positive. And that was the question. I'm forgetting the exact question, but it was something about a challenge, something challenging. I don't know if you guys remember. And so he went into, and he was very sincere and open about whatever that challenge was, but there was no other question about what are the positives. So I hope, I don't know, I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm curious now, based on kind of those thoughts, what advice would you give them moving forward if they did match and decided to keep exploring the connection?
Well, that was a first date, correct?
Yes, that was their first date.
What advice would I give them? I think talking a little bit more about themselves and not so much what they do or what they like, more about who they are. I think trying to get on common ground as far as those things go. And that's where you start to figure out if you have similar core values or if you have similar life goals. I think a lot of times people get caught up with activities, and they believe that having similar activities in common, that makes for a good partnership, but it has nothing to do with it. In fact, when people do things for the first time together, it increases the likelihood that you fall in love, right? If you're doing something new and something new that neither one of you has done. So like if you have a couple and things are getting boring in the relationship, they should just put together a bucket list of things that neither one has done before. And that in and of itself could change the trajectory of the relationship. So for them, I would just be more authentic and focus a little bit more on who they are as human beings and not so much on the activities or what they like to read or what they do for a living, and more about what they're passionate about, what lights them up, and those kind of things.
I love that you said that, hobbies and activities aren't necessarily, just because you have them in common, like the best foundation. And that isn't to say, you're both runners, you're not going to, that's not a good thing. But I do think that in dating, people are like, oh, I need somebody who loves hiking because I love hiking, or I need somebody who does this. And then other people will put things on their profile because they're like, I want to attract people who like these things, even though I don't necessarily. Like, I feel like I need to fit that mold because people want to hang out with people who like doing the same things. And that isn't the best foundation for a long-term partnership. Yes, like, it's great to be able to do things together, but as you've been saying, it's really about that alignment of values and your ability to communicate. And it shouldn't matter if, one person loves one activity and the other person doesn't. You don't need to explore every single thing together, and do all of those things together. And I love the advice of doing things that neither of you have done as part of kind of, an existing relationship or even a new one. So I really, really love all of that thought, Arlene.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's science and there's data to prove that this is effective. And if an activity, and I want to go back to the running part, because yeah, if your activities are connected to your core values, then they matter. So perhaps someone who runs has a core value about health and fitness, and those things should, ideally you want them to be aligned, because it could be a reason for issues down the line. So, and again, also, you don't have to do everything with your significant other, and you shouldn't. It's important. Long-term relationships do well when each individual has a life and then they have a life together.
That really reminds me of Esther Perel. I remember I was listening to I think it was a podcast that she was on, and she was essentially talking about how essentially right now in today's day and age, we expect our partner to be everything: our lover, our confidant, our friend, our, exploring buddy, the person that we do everything with. And we rely on them for essentially all of these buckets of needs. And we're not really diversifying that across friends, whereas historically you generally had more people in your social circle that fit these different molds and needs. And so I just think that really goes to what you're saying about how you can have more success and more fulfillment by being two individual people that also have a shared life together. Because I think that also gives you, that layer of interest in the other person. It gives you something to talk about, something that keeps things interesting. It's new, it's novel. I was reading a book recently about when your mind goes on autopilot. And essentially, when you're younger, everything, and time in particular, feels like it's going really slowly because everything is a new and novel experience. And because of that, our brain actually slows down time for us. And then as we get older, we start to say, oh, I've seen this before. I've done this before. I've seen this. I've done this. I've seen this. I've done this. And so because of that, our brain just puts everything on autopilot. And so it's that common thought of, have you ever driven somewhere and then realized that you were there all of a sudden and you just missed the entire drive? And the recommendation at that point is to create new neural pathways in your brain by taking different routes, because that makes it new, novel, and intriguing. And so I really appreciate that insight that you shared about being able to, have things that you like to do together, create that bucket list to try new shared experiences, but also be your own individual person.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
I love that. And I love everything that you just said. I think novelty is the key to life in terms of arousal and just spicing things up. Just bring novelty in. And, people say, well, we sort of, our relationship fell apart, or we grew apart. And I think a lot of it just has to do with people not checking in. But if you're doing everything together, it's essential for you to have a life and the other person to have a life, and to check in regularly, talk every day, spend 10 minutes a day talking. What are your dreams? What do you love? What book did you read that you want to share with your significant other? What experiences you've had? Not just talk about who's taking out the garbage, who's buying the groceries, not maintenance, but more about our dreams and our goals. And my husband and I do an annual bucket list that we update, things that we want to do. and we keep it interesting because that's the key to life.
I love that.
I'm curious to know, what's the most recent bucket
I know,
list
I want to know
thing you've
too.
done?
Or your favorite bucket list item, both.
So I had traveled to Europe several times, but I had never gone to Italy. For some reason, I was holding off because I really wanted to have that special someone in my life. And he had been to Europe many times, never to Italy. So we went and took 2 weeks, and it was amazing. We hit every possible place, we can go in that time frame. And it was wonderful. And we do things like that. We bought a motorcycle a couple of years ago before COVID. We wanted to do an RV and do trips around the country in an RV. So we did that. I mean, we're always adding to our bucket list and doing things that neither one of us has done before.
I feel like I'm going to add some of those to my bucket list now.
I'm going to start a bucket list. I know, right? Well, I have to start my bucket list and then I'm going to add these things. So I have the $1 million question for you, Arlene. Date in a blank. What did you think? Did they match? And why or why not do you think that?
This is such a tough question. I don't know that they matched. I think because, as I mentioned, and I wish I could remember the details because it's just slipping my mind. The one question that she asked to garner something negative, it was just almost like a way of confirming to herself that she was going to rule him out. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into that and I may be completely wrong, but I don't know. I don't think so.
I have to go back and re-listen to this because I'm trying to remember what the question is too, and it's not coming to mind.
It was something that then he went into a story, speaking about himself in, whatever it was, like a challenge that he has. And, what is it about yourself that you want to change? Something like that was the question.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll share my guess. So I wasn't sure if they would match or not. I thought the conversation was pretty smooth, but I didn't necessarily know, are they both fully here for it? So I was kind of on the fence. So I know that's sort of a cop-out answer, but that's mine. Laura, will you reveal what actually happened as the host of the date?
Yes, I'm happy to reveal what happened. So they did indeed match. They had a little bit of back and forth between the two of them, to the point where even we talked with Shresth after the fact, and he had mentioned that when they were exchanging messages, she had shared that Dear John was, I believe, I don't know if he said her favorite movie or her favorite book, but he ended up watching it so that he could relate to her, which I thought was really, really sweet. However, timing wasn't super great for the two of them, so they did fizzle out, but we are happy to report that there was at least that initial match, and they decided to say, you know what, I might have had reasons for ruling you out, but I'm going to see if we can continue this to maybe rule each other in, at least for a little while.
Okay, that's great. And I think it's great for people to just really give somebody a shot before they totally decide.
Yeah, totally agree with that. All right. So as we wrap up, a question we love to ask all of our experts. Do you have any words of wisdom or advice you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I would say this: never give up on love. There is a lid to every pot. Just really get to know yourself so that then you can make a selection of someone who is a match for you. Don't try to be something that you're not. Just be who you are and find someone who is going to match who you are. That's what I would say.
I don't know if it's like chills or tears. I am obsessed with that advice. And as a hopeless romantic myself, I definitely appreciate you sharing that advice with our audience.
I was really excited by the phrase, a lid to every pot. I think it's a really beautiful reminder that, your lid is out there. And sometimes it feels like you're, in this thrift store, searching for that other piece of the cooking gear, and it can be really stressful and you can find a lot of things that don't fit, but you just have to keep hunting. It's out there.
Arlene, for our final question, how can our audience get connected with you?
I am on all social media, so feel free, Instagram in particular, at Arlene Washburn. And you can find me at AV Connections as well. But at Arlene Washburn on Instagram is usually the best way to get a hold of me quickly. And reach out.
We'll include that in the show notes for any listeners who want to check it out.
Thank you.
Arlene, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you. It was really a great conversation, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
That's all we've got for you today. Shoot us a message on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Blink Date or at Date in a Blink to let us know what you think. If you want to try voice first speed dating from the comfort of your home, download the Blink Date app today. You can also sign up to participate in Date in a Blink by visiting our website at www.theblinkdate.com. In the meantime, thanks for joining us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed listening and look forward to talking with you again next time.